a bride's escape, a journey to unexpected love. You're in a wedding dress, heart pounding, fleeing a life you never chose. You jump into what you think is your getaway car, only to find a stranger behind the wheel. What would you do? Would you panic, or would you see it as fate's unexpected turn? Subscribe to our channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments what you would do in this situation. Eleanor stumbled into the wrong car, still in her wedding gown, and emerged with a new destiny in her hands. Eleanor was escaping an arranged marriage, but what she found was a man whose eyes bore the same mark of pain. Edward didn't know that on that quiet Saturday, someone would invade his solitude and give voice back to the empty spaces of his soul. She carried a daughter, a grief, and a ring that still tied her fingers to the past. He carried an absence that echoed through every wall of his house, and a promise he never had time to keep. What began as a refuge turned into routine, and routine, without them noticing, turned into affection. But when her father collapses and her ex-fiancé seeks revenge, the past explodes with truths no one was prepared to face. Between hospitals, inheritances, and broken promises, a new opportunity arises to love without guilt, to rebuild without erasing. Two broken hearts, a child who unites them, and a story that proves love doesn't have to be the first to be eternal. This story will give you goosebumps and remind you that some encounters are written by pain, but sealed by destiny. The dress felt like armor on Eleanor's shoulders. Each hand-embroidered pearl seemed like a shackle. Each layer of tulle sighed like a suppressed lament. In the mirror of the changing room at St. Michael's Church in Kensington, she contemplated the woman she had become, or rather, the woman her father insisted she should be. Her auburn hair fell in perfect waves over the sweetheart neckline. Her flawless makeup sculpted her delicate features, but her green eyes betrayed everything. Fear, rage, and a hopelessness that all the powder in the world couldn't hide. "Mummy, you look pretty like a princess," whispered 6-year-old Isabella, curled up on the leather sofa in the changing room, her blonde hair escaping the braids her nanny had so carefully made. Eleanor knelt in front of her daughter, the dress rustling against the cold marble. She touched the child's small face with trembling hands. "Isa, my darling, you know Mummy loves you more than anything in this world, right?" The child's blue eyes filled with a precocious wisdom that broke Eleanor's heart. Isabella was barely 3 when she lost her father, but since then, she had learned to read her mother's expressions, like deciphering a silent book. "You're sad, aren't you, Mummy? Is it because of Uncle Ben?" she asked, stroking Eleanor's face with her little hand. Eleanor's heart clenched. How could she explain to a 6-year-old that the man she was about to marry was nothing more than a business arrangement? How could she tell her that she had discovered 2 days earlier, through messages on his phone, that Ben had had a mistress for months? How could she reveal that all of this, the lavish church, the 400 guests, the imported flowers, was nothing more than a charade orchestrated by Arthur Sterling to maintain the family's honor? Outside the changing room, the murmurs grew louder. Familiar voices, aunts, cousins, friends from London's high society, all waiting for the moment when the inconsolable widow would finally move on and set a good example for her daughter. "Dr. Eleanor," the wedding planner's voice echoed from the other side of the door. "It's time. Your father is waiting." Eleanor closed her eyes. Arthur Sterling, the man who built an empire in London's real estate sector, who never took no for an answer, who saw his daughter as a strategic piece on his business chessboard. For him, 3 years of mourning had been long enough. Isabella needed a father figure, and he needed a son-in-law who would strengthen his businesses. Ben Carter was the perfect choice, young, ambitious, a Harvard graduate, with an impeccable resume, and a thirst for power that impressed even Arthur himself. What no one knew except Eleanor was that behind the perfect facade, Ben collected lies like trophies. "Mummy," Isabella took her hand, her small fingers intertwined with hers. "Can we go?" The simple question resonated like a cry in the silence of the changing room. Eleanor looked at her daughter, then at the mirror, then at the closed door behind which a future she hadn't chosen awaited her. "Do you want us to go, my darling?" Isabella nodded, her golden curls dancing. "I want to stay just with you, Mummy, like we always have." At that moment, something broke inside Eleanor. It wasn't a rational decision. It was an instinct of protection that emerged from the depths of her soul. She stood up, grabbed the small bag that held her documents and some essential belongings, and extended her hand to Isabella. "Then let's go. Now. Now." Eleanor opened the changing room door and slipped out into the side corridor, avoiding the main hall where the guests were waiting. Her footsteps echoed on the marble, the sound muffled by distant conversations and the organ music that had already begun to play. She found the emergency exit that led to the back car park. The London air, warm and polluted in June, hit her face like a liberating slap. She firmly took Isabella's hand and began to run. The 15,000-pound dress tangled around her legs, but she didn't stop. She ran through the car park, past the gardeners tending the church's landscaping, ignoring the astonished gaze of the chauffeurs waiting for guests. She reached Park Lane, breathless and desperate. She tried to order a car through an app, but her hands trembled so much she could barely type on her phone. Isabella, scared, sobbed softly. "Mummy, where are we going?" "I don't know, my darling, but far from here." It was then that she saw the black SUV parked on the corner. Armored, elegant, with dark windows reflecting the afternoon sun. No one was nearby. The door was unlocked. Eleanor didn't think twice. She opened the back door, helped Isabella in, and threw herself onto the leather seat, her dress spreading like a white cloud around her. "Please," she gasped without even looking forward. "Drive, now, before they find me." Silence. Then, a masculine voice, deep and calm. "I think there's been a mistake." Eleanor looked up and saw a man's reflection in the rearview mirror, brown hair with gray at the temples, dark, penetrating eyes, strong but kind features. He wore an impeccable navy blue suit, but there was nothing ostentatious about his posture. He exuded a discreet, almost melancholic elegance. I thought it was a rideshare car," he completed, his voice unhurried, without irritation. "Just a quiet curiosity." Eleanor felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She was there, invading a stranger's car, dressed as a bride, with her daughter in her arms, looking like a crazy fugitive. "I'm sorry, I'll get out." "Didn't you want? Are you running from something?" he asked, his eyes still fixed on the rearview mirror. The question caught her off guard. It wasn't accusatory or curious. It was understanding, as if he recognized something familiar in her desperation. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. He nodded slowly, started the car, and began to drive. "I won't ask what, but if you're running, you must have a good reason." Eleanor hugged Isabella tighter to her chest. The child had stopped crying and was observing the man with childish curiosity. "Are you an angel?" Isabella suddenly asked. Edward, though Eleanor still didn't know his name, smiled for the first time, a small but genuine smile. "No, little one. I'm just someone who, sometimes, also needs to run from some things." They drove in silence through the busy streets of London. Eleanor watched the buildings, the people, life happening normally, while hers crumbled and rebuilt itself in the same instant. "Where do you want to go?" he asked after a few blocks. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have nowhere to go." Everyone has somewhere to go. Sometimes you just need to discover where it is. He drove to an elegant apartment building near Hyde Park. He stopped in the underground car park and turned to her. "My name is Edward Davies. I live alone in an apartment too big for one person. I have a guest room I haven't used in years, and a kitchen that prepares meals for a family that no longer exists." Eleanor studied him in silence. There was something in his voice, a familiar sadness that resonated with her own. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." "Why?" he replied, turning off the engine. "Sometimes one recognizes their own solitude in others." He looked at Isabella, who had fallen asleep in her mother's arms. "And why? This little one reminds me of someone I lost a long time ago." At that moment, Eleanor knew her life had changed forever. Not only because she had fled a marriage she didn't want, but because she had entered, by chance or destiny, the world of a man who carried wounds as deep as her own. He got out of the car, opened their door, and, without further questions, guided them to the lift. As the doors closed and they began to ascend, Eleanor closed her eyes and for the first time in 3 years felt that perhaps she could breathe again. Outside, somewhere in the city, her phone was surely already exploding with calls from Arthur, from Ben, from the wedding organizers. But in that silent lift, rising to the 18th floor, she felt that she was finally going in the right direction. The apartment was a reflection of Edward's soul, elegant, organized, but empty of life. White walls, decorated with abstract paintings, minimalist design furniture, a dazzling view of Hyde Park through the large windows. Everything impeccable, everything in its place, everything too silent. "Isabella can sleep in the guest room," he said, carrying the sleeping child in his arms with a care that surprised Eleanor. "There are clean clothes in the wardrobe. Some were my daughter's." The words came out heavy, laden with a pain he tried to hide. Eleanor followed him down the hall, observing the photographs on the walls. Edward younger, next to a smiling brunette woman, a brown-haired child playing in a park, moments of happiness frozen in time. She was Isabella's age when... He didn't finish the sentence, just gently laid the child on the bed with infinite delicacy. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor murmured, recognizing the universal language of loss. 5 years ago, he replied, adjusting the blanket over Isabella. "Cancer. Clara and Sophia left 3 months apart. First my wife, then my daughter." The silence that settled between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who knew the geography of pain, who knew that some wounds don't fully heal, they just learn to coexist with the skin. In the living room, Edward poured water for Eleanor and sat at a respectful distance on the leather sofa. She was still wearing the wedding dress, but now it seemed less like armor and more like a ghost of what almost was. "May I ask what you were running from?" His voice was low, unhurried. Eleanor took a deep breath, surprised by how easily the words came out. "From an arranged marriage. My father, he never accepted that I raised Isabella alone. For him, a woman needs a man to be respected. A child needs a father to have structure. When I discovered my fiancée had a mistress, I realized I was about to exchange an honest solitude for a deceitful companionship. And your first husband? Andrew died 3 years ago. A car accident on the M25, in one of those torrential rains that turn London into chaos." She touched the ring she still wore on her finger. "We were happy, truly happy. After he left, I learned that it's possible to be alone without being lonely. But my father never understood that." Edward nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. "Arthur Sterling," he said suddenly. "You're Arthur Sterling's daughter?" It wasn't a question. Eleanor looked at him, surprised. You know him? Every businessman in London knows Arthur Sterling, at least by reputation. Edward smiled without humor. He tried to buy my company twice in recent years. He didn't take the rejections very well. And why did you refuse? Because some things are priceless. My company was built with Clara. Every project carries her memory. Selling it would be like selling my own soul. Eleanor studied the man in front of her. Edward Davies. Now the name made sense. Owner of Davies Architecture. Responsible for some of the city's most innovative projects. Specialist in sustainable construction and bioclimatic design. A man who built dreams for others while living in a house empty of his own. He's going to look for me, she said, suddenly aware of the reality that awaited her. My father doesn't accept being contradicted. He'll use all the resources he has to find me and drag me back. Then let's hope he doesn't think of looking for you at the house of someone who has already rejected his business twice, Edward replied with an almost imperceptible smile. Let's cross our fingers. At that moment, Eleanor's phone vibrated. Then it vibrated again and again. She took it out of her bag and saw the screen lit up with dozens of missed calls. Arthur, Ben, the wedding planner, the nanny, aunts, cousins, friends. 43 missed calls. In 2 hours, she murmured, turning off the device. What are you going to do? I don't know, she admitted. I've never run from anything in my life. I was always the obedient daughter, the perfect wife, the well-behaved widow. This is the first time I've chosen my own path. And how does it feel? Eleanor thought for a moment, searching for the right word. Terrified, she finally said, and free at the same time. Edward stood up and went to the window, watching the city lights begin to turn on at dusk. Do you know what I learned after I lost Clara and Sophia? He asked without turning around. That fear and freedom often go hand in hand. Fear shows us that we are alive, that we are doing something that matters. Freedom gives us the right to choose our own fear. And what was yours? The fear of continuing to live. He turned to her, his dark eyes reflecting a vulnerability he rarely showed. In the first few years, I woke up every day hoping the pain would pass, that things would go back to normal. Then I understood that there is no normal after loss. There is just different, a different kind of life, a different kind of happiness. Eleanor felt something stir in her chest, a silent understanding that went beyond words. And did you find that different kind of happiness? I learned to live with nostalgia, he replied. But happiness, I think I'm still looking for. From the guest room came the soft sound of Isabella's breathing. Eleanor got up and went to the slightly ajar door, watching her daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. In recent months, the child had developed nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night, asking if her mummy was leaving too. Edward approached silently, observing the scene with an expression Eleanor couldn't decipher. She's beautiful, he murmured. She looks like you. She is my strength, Eleanor replied. Everything I do is for her, so that she grows up knowing that a woman can choose her own destiny. And today you chose. Today I ran. Sometimes running is the only way to choose. When they returned to the living room, night had already enveloped London in its cloak of twinkling lights. Edward prepared chamomile tea, and they sat down again, this time closer, as if the conversation had created an invisible bridge between them. Can I ask an indiscreet question? Eleanor said after a sip of tea. You can. Why did you help me? A man like you, successful, respected. Why did you risk getting involved with a stranger on the run? Edward was silent for a long moment, turning the cup in his hands. Because when I saw you in that car, desperate but determined, protecting your daughter, I saw Clara, not physically, but spiritually. I saw the strength a mother has when she needs to protect what she loves. And because, he looked directly at her, for 3 years I haven't seen real life in anyone. Only masks, performances, people playing roles. You were being genuine, even in desperation. Perhaps especially in desperation. Eleanor felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Thank you," she said simply. "Why?" "For seeing me, not Arthur Sterling's daughter, not the inconsolable widow, not the runaway bride. Just me." Edward smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "Eleanor," he said, testing the name on his lips. "Beautiful name." "Edward," she replied. "Strong name." And at that moment, both knew something had changed. It wasn't love. It was too early. They were too wounded for that. But it was recognition. It was the realization that sometimes two broken people can support each other without causing more harm. Edward Davies didn't know he had just saved not only a runaway bride, but the daughter of one of London's most powerful men. And Eleanor didn't know she had just found the only man capable of understanding that. Sometimes, the greatest courage isn't in accepting what is imposed on us, but in running from what destroys us. When they finally retired to their respective rooms, both knew their lives had changed forever. Eleanor, lying in the guest bed next to her daughter, felt for the first time in years that perhaps she could dream again. And Edward, in his long empty room, closed his eyes and allowed himself to imagine that perhaps solitude wasn't a permanent state. Outside, London continued its nocturnal dance, indifferent to the personal dramas of its inhabitants. But in that apartment on the 18th floor, two wounded souls had found, in each other, the possibility of healing. It was just the beginning. The morning arrived with the familiar sounds of London waking up. Distant horns, the rumble of buses on Park Lane, the constant murmur of a city that never completely stops. Eleanor woke up disoriented for a moment, until reality hit her like a cold wave. She wasn't home. She had fled her own wedding and slept in a stranger's house. Beside her, Isabella was still sleeping peacefully, her blonde hair spread on the pillow, a soft smile on her lips. It was the first time in weeks that the child had slept through the night without nightmares. Eleanor got up slowly, still wearing the nightdress Edward had left for her, a delicate, feminine garment that had surely belonged to his wife. Barefoot on the cold floor, she walked to the window and contemplated the view. Hyde Park stretched green and vast, dotted with people exercising, dogs running free, life happening in its simplest and most beautiful form. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee reached her, accompanied by the low sound of someone moving in the kitchen. Eleanor felt a pang of anxiety mixed with gratitude. How could she thank a man who had saved her life without even knowing her? She put on a robe she found in the wardrobe and followed the smell of coffee. Edward was facing away from her, preparing breakfast with precise, silent movements. He wore a simple t-shirt and jeans, his hair still disheveled from sleep. There was something endearingly domestic about the scene, as if he were enacting a normalcy he hadn't lived in a long time. "Good morning," she said softly, so as not to startle him. He turned, and Eleanor noticed that his eyes seemed clearer in the morning light, less burdened by the melancholy of the previous night. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I deserved, considering the circumstances." Edward smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Coffee? I made French toast, too. I don't cook much, but breakfast was always my specialty." As he poured coffee into delicate porcelain cups, Eleanor observed the details of the kitchen. Designer, modern, but with personal touches that spoke of a shared life. heart-shaped refrigerator magnets, a framed children's drawing on the wall, a photo of a smiling woman holding a small child. "Clara and Sophia?" she asked, subtly pointing to the photo. "Yes. This was taken on the last Christmas we spent together. Sophia was 5 and had just lost her first tooth. She was convinced the tooth fairy was Santa Claus's cousin." His voice was soft, laden with nostalgia, but not acute pain. Eleanor smiled, imagining the scene. "Isabella also believes in fairies. She says they live in the garden flowers and come out at night to dance in the moonlight. Children see magic where adults just see everyday life," Edward observed, handing her the cup. "Perhaps that's why losing a child hurts so much. We don't just lose the person. We lose our ability to see the world through their eyes." Eleanor's phone vibrated on the table, interrupting the moment. The screen showed an endless sequence of missed calls and unread messages. Arthur, Ben, the nanny, people she didn't even remember knowing. The outside world hadn't forgotten her escape. "You'll have to face them eventually," Edward said, noticing her expression. "I know. I just don't know how." She turned off the phone again. "My father won't give up. He'll use all the resources he has, and they are many, to find me and drag me back. What if you went to him first?" Eleanor looked at him, surprised. "How so?" "Instead of waiting for him to find you, you could go to him, on your terms, in your time. Show that you're not running on a whim, but making a conscious decision." "Uncle Eddie!" Isabella's voice echoed through the apartment, interrupting the conversation. Both turned, surprised. The child was at the kitchen entrance, wearing pink pajamas that had clearly belonged to Sophia, her hair disheveled and a radiant smile on her face. "Isa, my darling, this is Edward. You can call him Mr. Edward," Eleanor gently corrected. "But he looks like an Uncle Eddie," Isabella insisted, approaching without shyness. "Can I call you Uncle Eddie?" Edward knelt to the child's height, and Eleanor noticed how his eyes filled with a tenderness he had been trying to hide for years. "You can call me whatever you like, little one. Uncle Eddie, do you have children?" The simple question resonated in the silence of the kitchen like a cry. Eleanor held her breath, but Edward didn't hesitate. "I had a daughter. She was about your age. Her name was Sophia. Where is she now? She became a star in the sky. Sometimes, at night, I look at the sky and wave to her." Isabella considered this information with the seriousness that only children can apply to the mysteries of life and death. "She must be very pretty being a star," she finally said. "Can you show me which one she is tonight?" Edward swallowed hard, but nodded. "I can. And can I wave to her too? She'd really like that." Eleanor felt her eyes fill with tears. There was something deeply moving in the ease with which Isabella accepted the pain of others, transforming it into something luminous and hopeful. Breakfast unfolded in a strangely familiar atmosphere. Isabella chattered non-stop, telling Edward about her favorite doll, about ballet classes, about how her mummy was the prettiest doctor in the world. Edward listened with genuine attention, asking questions and laughing at her stories, with a naturalness that surprised Eleanor. "Uncle Eddie, do you want to see my swan dance?" Isabella asked, already jumping from her chair. "Isabella, darling, perhaps Edward has things to do." "Actually," he interrupted, "I'd love to see your swan dance." The child ran to the middle of the living room and began an elaborate performance, spinning on her bare feet, moving her arms like wings, humming an invented melody. Edward applauded at all the right moments, made enthusiastic comments, and Eleanor perceived that, for the first time since she had known him, he seemed genuinely happy. "She's amazing," he murmured, when Isabella went to get her doll to introduce it to. "Did you like her?" Eleanor replied. "That's rare. She's usually shy with strangers. Perhaps I'm not a stranger anymore." His eyes met hers, and Eleanor felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't attraction, or at least not only that. It was recognition. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. The moment was interrupted by the intercom. The porter's voice echoed through the apartment, tense and worried. "Mr. Davies, there's someone downstairs wanting to come up. He says he's the doctor's father." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Arthur. He had found her. "How did he know I was here?" she murmured, more to herself. "Your father is a powerful man. Powerful men have resources," Edward replied calmly. "Do you want me to tell him you're not here?" Eleanor looked at Isabella, who was playing happily, unaware of the tension that had settled in the room. She thought of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. The escape, the courage she had found when she least expected it, the feeling of finally being in control of her own life. "No," she finally said. "Tell him to come up. It's time to face this." Edward spoke to the porter. Then he turned to her. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm going to do it anyway." When Arthur Sterling stepped out of the lift, he brought with him all the authority that a decades-old empire builds. Tall, imposing, with impeccably combed gray hair and a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, he surveyed the apartment with calculating eyes before resting his gaze on his daughter. "Eleanor." "Father." The silence that followed was charged with unspoken tensions. Arthur greeted Edward with a cold, calculated nod, clearly recognizing him. "Mr. Davies, what a surprise to find you involved in this situation." "Mr. Sterling," Edward replied with professional courtesy. "I merely offered refuge to someone who needed it." "How noble of you!" The sarcasm in Arthur's voice was almost palpable. "Eleanor, we need to talk, alone." "Grandpa!" Isabella appeared running from the living room, throwing herself into her grandfather's arms, with the naturalness of someone who didn't perceive the undercurrents of conflict around her. Arthur knelt to hug his granddaughter, and for a moment his severe expression softened. "My little princess, are you all right?" "Yes, Grandpa. Uncle Eddie is really cool. He's going to show me a star tonight." Arthur shot an inquisitive glance at Edward, then at Eleanor. "Uncle Eddie? Father? Can we talk in the living room?" Eleanor intervened, taking Isabella in her arms. "Isa, darling, how about you play in the room for a bit?" Edward offered to take the child, leaving father and daughter alone. When the door closed, Arthur wasted no time. "You shamed me, Eleanor. You shamed me, and you shamed our family. Do you know how many people were waiting in that church? Do you know the embarrassment you caused?" "I know, Father, and I regret the embarrassment. But I don't regret the decision." "Decision?" Arthur laughed without humor. "You call running from a marriage like a scared child a decision? Leaving 400 guests waiting? Humiliating Ben in front of all of London?" "Ben had a mistress, Father. Several, actually. Did you know?" Arthur paused, his face hardening even more. "Those are details that are resolved within the marriage. Men are men, Eleanor. The important thing is commitment, stability, the future you would build together." "The future you would build through us," she corrected him. "This marriage was never about me or about Ben. It was about business, about alliances, about expanding your empire." "And what's wrong with that?" Arthur stood up, beginning to pace the room. "Do you think romantic love builds fortunes? That feelings pay the bills? Isabella needs stability, a guaranteed future. You need a man to protect you, to give structure to your life." "I have structure, Father. I'm a doctor. I have my own clinic. I've raised my daughter with dignity for 3 years." "Raising a daughter alone is not dignity. It's stubbornness." His voice became harsher. And now, what do you intend to do? Hide in this man's house forever? Eleanor took a deep breath, gathering courage. I intend to start over my way, on my terms, and if you can't accept that, then we'll have a problem. Arthur studied her in silence for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was low and controlled, more dangerous than any shout. You are my daughter, Eleanor. Carrying the Sterling name comes with privileges, but also responsibilities. I will not allow you to destroy everything I have built for a whim. It's not a whim, Father. It's my life. Your life is my responsibility, as long as you're making irresponsible decisions. He walked towards the door. Then he turned one last time. You have 48 hours to come home and sort this situation out. If you don't come back, I will take the necessary measures to protect Isabella from further instability. The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. Eleanor felt the ground move beneath her feet. You can't. I can, and I will. I have the best lawyers in the country, Eleanor. I have influence, resources, connections. If I prove that you are mentally unstable, that you ran from your own wedding on impulse, that you are exposing my granddaughter to inappropriate situations. He left the sentence hanging. Arthur left without saying goodbye, leaving behind only the echo of his words and the expensive perfume of his cologne. Eleanor stood in the middle of the living room, trembling not from cold, but from a rage she hadn't felt in a long time. Edward appeared a few minutes later, carrying Isabella, who was dozing in his arms. Did you hear anything? Eleanor asked, receiving her daughter. No, she was too busy showing me how to make card castles. He studied her carefully. And you? How did it go? He gave me 48 hours to come back. If I don't, he'll try to take Isabella from me. Edward was silent for a moment, processing the information. Can he do that, with the resources he has? Maybe. Eleanor carefully placed Isabella on the sofa, covering her with a blanket. My father doesn't make empty threats, Edward. If he said he's going to do it, he's going to do it. Then what are you going to do? Eleanor looked at her sleeping daughter, then at Edward, then at the view from the window where London stretched infinitely and indifferently to the personal dramas of its inhabitants. I don't know, she admitted. For the first time in my life, I really don't know what to do. Edward approached her, stopping at a respectful but comforting distance. Do you want advice from someone who has already lost everything he loved? She nodded. Sometimes fighting doesn't mean resisting. Sometimes it means finding a way to win that no one expected. What do you mean? Your father expects you to come back begging for forgiveness or to hide like a criminal. What if you did neither? What if you went to battle, but on your own terms? Eleanor faced him, intrigued. Go on. You're a doctor, right? Independent, successful, respected. You don't need his money to live. What does he really have against you? The fact that I've defied his authority and the threat of taking Isabella from me. And what if you took that power away from him? What if you showed everyone, including the courts if necessary, that you are not an unbalanced woman who ran on impulse, but a responsible mother who made a difficult but necessary decision to protect her daughter from a toxic environment? For the first time since the conversation with Arthur, Eleanor felt a spark of hope. You're suggesting I make the story public. I'm suggesting you stop running and start fighting, but intelligently. Isabella stirred on the sofa, murmuring something inaudible. Eleanor knelt beside her daughter, stroking her hair with infinite tenderness. Would you do that? Would you support me in a battle against Arthur Sterling? Edward didn't hesitate. I would. Why? You barely know me. You owe me nothing. He knelt on the other side of the sofa, watching Isabella sleep with an expression Eleanor couldn't fully decipher. Because sometimes you find in other people the fight you haven't been able to win alone. And because, he looked at Eleanor, I think you are a good mother doing the best you can in an impossible situation. That deserves to be defended. At that moment, with Isabella sleeping between them and the London sun streaming through the windows, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. She wasn't alone. Not just physically, but emotionally. There was someone on her side, someone willing to fight with her, for the daughter she loved more than her own life. It was terrifying. It was comforting. It was the beginning of something neither of them was prepared to name. Outside, Arthur Sterling was surely already putting into motion the resources he had promised to use. But inside that apartment, two wounded people began to discover that, together, perhaps they were stronger than apart. The battle was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Arthur, and Edward's apartment had subtly transformed. Isabella's drawings decorated the refrigerator next to Sophia's photos. Colorful toys contrasted with the minimalist decor, and the sound of children's laughter had once again echoed through the silent halls. Eleanor had established a routine that surprised herself. She woke up early, prepared breakfast with Edward, took Isabella to the private school near the park, returned to work at her clinic, which she had kept running even during the crisis, and came back at night for dinners that seemed increasingly natural, more familiar. Edward, for his part, found himself eagerly awaiting the moments when the two of them came home. After years living in a mechanical routine between office and empty apartment, their presence had brought colors he didn't even remember existed. Isabella had invited him to attend a school presentation the week before, and he had felt his heart clench as he watched her dance on stage, waving to them from the audience as if it were the most natural thing in the world. But Arthur's shadow loomed over all of them, like a storm cloud about to break. On that Thursday morning, while Isabella played in the living room and Edward worked in his home office, Eleanor received a call that would change everything. "Dr. Eleanor?" The voice was Marina's, her assistant at the clinic. "You need to see the news now." Eleanor turned on the television, and what she saw made her stagger. A well-known journalist was narrating a report about the doctor who abandoned her own wedding, with photos of her leaving the church, images of Ben being comforted by friends, testimonies from guests who spoke about erratic behavior and emotional instability. But the worst was yet to come. The report showed images of Edward, identified as the single businessman who harbored the fugitive, and insinuated an inappropriate relationship between them. The final piece of Arthur's puzzle, to destroy not only Eleanor's reputation, but also Edward's, forcing them apart. "Uncle Eddie's on TV," Isabella shouted excitedly from the living room. "He's famous!" Edward appeared in the hallway, his face pale. He had seen the news too. "Eleanor, he destroyed you too," she murmured, turning off the television. "My father destroyed your reputation because of me. It wasn't your fault. It was his choice to use those tactics. But it was my fault you got involved in this." She stood up, beginning to pace. "I need to get out of here. I need to protect you and Isabella from this." "Eleanor, no." "Edward, you don't understand. My father won't stop. He'll continue to destroy everything and everyone around us until he gets what he wants. He's already ruined your professional image. What's next? Your company? Your employees?" Edward took her by the arms, forcing her to stop and look at him. "What if I didn't care about my professional image? What if it was more important for me to protect you two than to protect my reputation? You can't think like that. Can't think like..." "Why not?" His voice was firm, determined. "Do you think that after losing Clara and Sophia, I care what people think of me? Do you think money or status mean anything compared to what you two have brought into my life?" Isabella appeared between them, holding her doll and looking worried. "Why are you fighting?" she asked in a small voice. Eleanor knelt in front of her daughter, taking a deep breath to control her emotions. "We're not fighting, my darling. We're just talking about grown-up things." "Is it about Grandpa?" The question came with a perception that surprised both adults. "Why do you ask that, Isa?" "Because whenever someone talks about Grandpa, you get sad. And I don't like it when you get sad, Mummy." Eleanor felt her eyes fill with tears. Her 6-year-old daughter was learning to read the complexities of the adult world in a way no child should ever have to. "Come here, little one," Edward said, extending his arms to Isabella. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" "About what?" "About a very brave princess who faced a dragon to protect her little daughter." Isabella brightened, jumping onto Edward's lap. "Does the princess win?" "We'll find out together." While Edward distracted Isabella with the story, Eleanor tried to organize her thoughts. Arthur's smear campaign was just the beginning. She knew her father. She knew he wouldn't hesitate to use legal resources to take Isabella, claiming she was living in an improper situation with a man with no family ties. Her phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. 48 hours turned into 3 weeks. You lost your chance to do this the easy way. Now we'll do it the hard way. A.S. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the weight of inevitability. Arthur had declared war, and she needed to be prepared to fight. That night, after Isabella fell asleep, Eleanor found Edward in the office, working on the computer with unusual concentration. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Researching. Your father may be powerful, but powerful men always leave traces, and those traces aren't always clean." Eleanor approached the screen. Edward had gathered an impressive amount of information about Arthur Sterling. Shell companies, questionable transactions, projects approved in record time that didn't respect environmental laws. "Edward, what are you thinking of doing?" "Giving him what he gave us. Publicity. But this time, of the truth. You can't face my father like this. He has lawyers, influence, money. And I have the truth." Edward turned to her. "Eleanor, you're not the first person Arthur Sterling has tried to destroy for defying his will. I found at least 3 cases in the last 10 years. A journalist who investigated his businesses, a politician who opposed one of his projects, a former partner who wanted to leave the company. What happened to them? The journalist lost his job, the politician lost the election, the former partner lost everything. Your father has a pattern. Identify what the person values and threaten to destroy exactly that." Eleanor sank heavily into a chair. "In my case, it's Isabella." "Exactly. And that's why we need to attack first, before he has the opportunity to make legal moves to take her from you." "How?" Edward saved the file on the computer and turned completely to her. "By making the whole truth public, not just about the wedding escape, but about the reason for the escape, about Ben's infidelity, about your father's coercion, about the methods he uses to control people, and most importantly," he took her hands, "about the kind of toxic environment you were protecting Isabella from. What if that just makes things worse? What if it doesn't?" Edward gently stroked her face. "Eleanor, you fled that wedding because you knew it was the right thing to do. Now you need to have the same courage to fight for the life you want to build." At that moment, looking into Edward's dark, determined eyes, Eleanor realized she had fallen in love with him. Not out of gratitude, not for the security he offered, but for the man who had found in his pain the strength to overcome his own, for the man who was willing to risk everything to protect her and Isabella. "Edward, Me too," he said simply, understanding without her needing to finish the sentence. They kissed for the first time there, in the silent office, with London twinkling its lights through the window and the uncertain future stretching ahead like an unknown horizon, but full of possibilities. The next day, Eleanor made the bravest decision of her life. With Edward's help, she contacted an investigative journalist known for her integrity and courage. In a 2-hour interview, she told the whole truth. The arranged wedding, Ben's infidelity, Arthur's coercion, the threat against Isabella, and why she had chosen to flee. "Dr. Eleanor," the journalist asked, "do you regret anything about your decision?" "Nothing," she replied, her voice firm and clear. "The only thing I regret is not having had the courage to do this sooner. A mother doesn't just protect her children from physical dangers, but also from emotionally toxic environments. And I was about to raise my daughter in a home without love, without truth, without mutual respect." The interview aired on a Tuesday night on the country's highest-rated news program. The impact was immediate and devastating for Arthur. Within 48 hours, 3 different companies withdrew multi-million-pound contracts with Sterling Construction. The public prosecutor's office opened an investigation into some of the questionable transactions Edward had discovered. Women's rights groups adopted Eleanor as a symbol of maternal courage. But the sweetest victory came on a Thursday afternoon when Ben Carter appeared at Edward's apartment. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you," he said, his face red with rage and humiliation. "Then talk," she replied, Edward at her side in a silent show of support. "You destroyed me, my career, my reputation, my relationships, all ruined because of your petty revenge. I didn't destroy you, Ben. You destroyed yourself when you chose to betray my trust. I just didn't let you destroy my life in the process." Arthur is furious. He swore he's going to— "Arthur isn't going to do anything," Edward interrupted. "Because if he tries anything against Eleanor or Isabella, I guarantee the rest of the documentation I found about his activities will end up in the hands of all the competent authorities." Ben stared at them for a moment. Then he slammed the door and left. That night, as they prepared dinner together, a routine they had developed over the weeks, Eleanor received an unexpected call. "Eleanor," Arthur's voice sounded tired, defeated. "Father, can we talk? Without lawyers, without threats. Just father and daughter." "About what?" "About how I almost lost the only family I have left." They met in the park opposite Edward's building on a sunny Sunday afternoon. Arthur seemed to have aged years in a few weeks, his shoulders slumped, his gaze less sharp. "Isabella didn't come. She's with Edward. They're building a treehouse for her dolls." Arthur smiled sadly. "She likes him." "She does. And he likes her." "And you? Do you like him too?" Eleanor studied her father, looking for traps in the question. "I like him. A lot." "Does he make you happy?" "He does. We make each other happy." Arthur was silent for a long moment, watching children play in a nearby park. "Your grandfather," he finally said, "taught me that men build empires and women build homes. That success is measured in money and power, and that family is a business like any other that needs to be strategically managed." "And you believe that?" "I believed it for 62 years, until I saw my daughter on television talking about courage and self-worth and realized that she had learned something I never knew. That happiness is not negotiated, not arranged, not bought. It is built day by day with brave choices and true love." Eleanor felt tears burning her eyes. "Father, I almost lost you, and in the process, I almost lost my granddaughter too." He took a deep breath. "Can I meet him? This man who stole my daughter's heart?" "He didn't steal it, Father. I gave it to him. Freely." When they returned to the apartment, they found Edward and Isabella on the terrace, she sitting on his lap, while he pointed to different stars in the sky, which was beginning to darken. "Is that Sophia?" Isabella asked. "That one there," Edward confirmed, and you can talk to her whenever you want." "Hello, Sophia." Isabella waved to the sky. "I'm Isabella. I'm taking care of your daddy for you." Edward swallowed hard, his eyes filling with tears he didn't try to hide. Arthur watched the scene in silence, and Eleanor saw something in her father's face that she hadn't seen in years. Genuine tenderness. "Grandpa!" Isabella jumped from Edward's lap and ran to Arthur. "You came to meet Uncle Eddie!" "I did, my princess. I came to meet the man who is also taking care of you and your mummy." Edward stood up, extending his hand to Arthur in a formal greeting that slowly transformed into an awkward but sincere hug. "Thank you," Arthur murmured, "for taking care of them when I only knew how to hurt them." 6 months later, on a sunny December morning, Eleanor woke to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. She found Edward teaching Isabella how to make pancakes, both covered in flour and smiling. "Mummy," Isabella shouted, "Uncle Eddie's teaching me how to make a special breakfast." "Special for what?" Eleanor asked, kissing her daughter's forehead first, then Edward's lips. "To celebrate," Edward said, his eyes shining in a way she had learned to recognize as a prelude to surprises. He knelt right there in the messy kitchen, with Isabella clapping beside him, and pulled a small blue velvet box from his pocket. "Eleanor Sterling, you taught me that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them. You have brought light to a house that had been dark for years. You have brought laughter to halls that only knew silence." He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. "Will you marry me?" Truly this time, for love, by choice, because we want to build a family together. "Yes," she replied without hesitation, kneeling too to be at his height. "Yes, yes, yes!" Isabella jumped between them, shouting with joy. "Now Uncle Eddie is going to be my real daddy?" "If you want," Edward replied, hugging both of them at the same time. "I do, and Sophia wants it too. She told me last night." They laughed and cried at the same time, there in the kitchen full of flour and full of love, with London waking up outside and the future stretching bright and full of possibilities ahead. The wedding was simple, in a small chapel in Notting Hill, with only close family and true friends. Arthur walked Eleanor down the aisle, not as the man who once tried to control her life, but as the father who had learned to respect her. Isabella was the flower girl and carried the rings with an adorable seriousness that made everyone laugh. When the officiant asked if Edward accepted Eleanor as his wife, he replied, looking into her eyes, "I accept not only you, but the new life you offer me, the family I always dreamed of having again, and the opportunity to be happy in a way I thought I had lost forever." And when Eleanor was asked if she accepted Edward as her husband, she replied with a firm, clear voice, "I accept the man who taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. I accept the father Isabella chose, the partner I chose, and the future we will build together." Later, at the small reception in the apartment that had become home for the three of them, Edward and Eleanor danced on the terrace while Isabella slept on the living room sofa. The city stretched out illuminated at their feet, and for the first time in years, both felt exactly where they were supposed to be. "Do you regret anything?" Edward asked, turning her slowly. "Entering your car that day?" "Never." She smiled, resting her head on his chest. "You saved my life that day." "No," he murmured, kissing her auburn hair that shone in the moonlight. "You saved mine." And that night, with Isabella sleeping safely a few meters away, and London twinkling its lights like an infinity of earthly stars, Eleanor knew she had found not only love, but herself. She had fled a wedding she didn't want, and run straight into the arms of the destiny that was always hers. Sometimes, she thought as Edward kissed her under the starry sky, the best decisions in life begin with the word no. No to what diminishes us, No to what controls us. No to what prevents us from being who we truly are. And sometimes, the best love stories begin with an escape that is actually a race home. Thank you for reading. We hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales, and share your thoughts in the comments below.